There's a hidden phenomenon happening right now that most men are completely oblivious to, and it's sabotaging everything they want in relationships and attraction. Robert Greene, the master strategist behind The Art of Seduction, uncovered a critical truth that goes against everything society tells you about pursuing women. What if I told you that the very act of chasing is the exact mechanism destroying your chances? This isn't just motivational fluff. This is psychological warfare playing out in the dating world, and most men are losing because they don't even realize they're fighting the wrong battle. Before you brush this off as just another dating tip, understand that neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and evolutionary biology all point to this one single, counterintuitive principle. The law of scarcity attraction is fundamental to human desire, far beyond just relationships. When something is too easily available, our brain's valuation system automatically downgrades its worth. This isn't a conscious choice. It's a survival instinct hardwired into our neural circuits over millions of years. Robert Greene studied power dynamics across centuries and found patterns that repeat without fail. The moment you make yourself perpetually available, constantly texting, always rearranging your schedule for her, you trigger an ancient psychological circuit that broadcasts low value. Your good intentions mean nothing when you're activating subconscious evaluation mechanisms that operate far beneath rational thought. This stop-chasing psychology reveals something that makes most men deeply uncomfortable. Women are not attracted to pure effort, dedication, or devotion in the early stages. They are attracted to challenge, mystery, and the psychological tension created by uncertainty. Every romantic comedy, every love song, and all our cultural programming tells men the opposite. Pursue harder, show more interest, prove your commitment. This creates a devastating trap. Men double down on the very behaviors that repel the women they desire. The harder they chase, the faster women run. The more interest they show, the less interesting they become. This isn't about game playing. It's fundamental human psychology that operates whether we like it or not. If you've been told that being yourself and showing genuine interest is the key to attraction, you've been given advice that sounds nice but is functionally disastrous in the real world. The dating marketplace runs on principles of perceived value, scarcity, and social proof, not on fairness or good intentions. Before we dive deeper into why a certain level of emotional detachment can create magnetic attraction, I need you to do me a favor. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. This content is the result of hundreds of hours studying evolutionary psychology, Robert Greene's strategic frameworks, and real-world application. Your subscription helps the algorithm share this with other men who desperately need to understand these principles before they waste years chasing a validation that will never come. Now, understanding why chasing fails requires us to look beneath the surface. When you pursue someone relentlessly, you're not demonstrating value, you're seeking validation. And women have an extraordinarily calibrated social intuition that detects this difference instantly. They can sense whether your attention comes from a place of abundance versus scarcity, whether your interest stems from genuine choice or from a desperate need. This detection happens subconsciously, through your micro-expressions, your tone of voice, your energy, and behavioral patterns you don't even realize you're broadcasting. The man who chases communicates one thing with every interaction: I need you to validate my worth because I don't feel it myself. This creates a deep psychological repulsion that logic can't overcome. This brings us to the core solution, the foundation upon which all other principles of attraction are built: self-sufficiency. Robert Greene's work consistently emphasizes that true personal power comes from not needing others to complete you. In romance, this means building a life so fulfilling that a partner becomes a wonderful addition, not a desperate necessity. Psychological research on relationship satisfaction confirms this. Individuals who enter relationships from a place of wholeness experience far more sustainable and healthy connections than those seeking a partner to fill an internal void. Building genuine self-sufficiency isn't about becoming an isolated hermit. It is about cultivating the internal resources that allow you to engage with others from a position of abundance, not desperation. This journey requires an honest self-assessment. Where are you dependent on external validation right now? Do you need constant social interaction to feel valuable? Does your mood crash if a romantic prospect doesn't text back immediately? Are you incapable of enjoying activities by yourself? These dependencies create that needy energy that actively repels potential partners. The development process involves deliberately cultivating competence and satisfaction across all major areas of your life. We're talking about your physical health, your financial stability, doing meaningful work, building strong friendships, your intellectual growth, and having creative outlets. As you build genuine capability and find true satisfaction in these areas, you naturally become less needy in your romantic life. Why? Because your overall well-being is no longer exclusively dependent on a romantic outcome. This is where the emotional detachment dating approach becomes so effective, but it only works when it's built on a foundation of actual self-sufficiency, not performed indifference. Faking it doesn't work. When you genuinely enjoy your own company, have engaging projects that consume your time and energy, maintain fulfilling friendships, and pursue meaningful goals, you naturally have less emotional bandwidth to obsess over one person. This isn't a strategy you're using on someone. It becomes the reality you've created through intentional life design. As your own life becomes genuinely satisfying, you stop seeing every potential date as your possible salvation from dissatisfaction. This fundamental shift in your perception manifests in your behavior, making you infinitely more attractive because you are no longer energetically grasping for connection. A huge part of self-sufficiency is emotional self-regulation, the ability to manage your internal states without constantly needing someone else to soothe you. When you develop practices like meditation, have physical outlets like the gym, creative expressions like a hobby, and cognitive tools to process your own emotions, you become less volatile in romantic situations. You don't need constant reassurance. You don't spiral into anxiety during a communication gap. You don't interpret every single interaction through the lens of desperate need. This emotional stability is perceived as maturity and confidence, qualities that attraction research consistently identifies as highly desirable. Investing in your emotional self-regulation is perhaps the single most impactful thing you can do for your romantic success. The journey towards self-sufficiency is never truly complete. It's an ongoing practice of expanding your capabilities and reducing unhealthy dependencies. You have to regularly challenge yourself with new skills, new experiences, and new situations that build confidence in your ability to handle life's challenges on your own. This doesn't mean you should refuse help or reject connection. It means ensuring that you know, deep down, that you would be fundamentally okay on your own if you had to be. When you know you are complete by yourself, you can finally engage with others from a place of genuine desire rather than desperate need. This energetic shift transforms every single one of your interactions. It replaces that off-putting energy of neediness with the magnetic, confident energy of someone who wants connection but doesn't require it for their survival. And that, my friends, is the ultimate game changer. Thank you for watching. If this resonated with you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more content that will change the way you see the world. Integration represents the process of embodying these principles so completely that they become your natural operating system rather than strategies you consciously implement. Robert Greene emphasized that true power comes not from techniques you apply, but from becoming the person who naturally exhibits powerful qualities. In attraction contexts, this means the stop chasing women psychology becomes simply how you exist, rather than a method you follow. This integration requires time, consistent practice, and repeated exposure to situations where you choose response patterns aligned with your developed principles rather than your old reactive patterns. Because performed behaviors eventually crack under pressure, revealing the desperation underneath. Genuine transformation withstands pressure because there's no gap between your internal reality and external presentation. You actually are someone with abundant options, genuine self-sufficiency, and outcome independence, not someone pretending to have these qualities while internally obsessing over romantic outcomes. Integration progress. Initially, you might consciously remind yourself not to double text, to maintain strategic absence, or to focus on your own goals. These conscious reminders indicate you're still applying techniques rather than embodying principles. As integration progresses, these reminders become unnecessary. You naturally focus on your projects because they genuinely engage you. You don't obsess over message timing because you're genuinely busy, and you don't chase because you're genuinely content with or without any particular romantic outcome. This transition from conscious application to unconscious embodiment marks true transformation. Than judging yourself for backsliding, use these experiences as diagnostic tools, revealing which psychological buttons remain vulnerable. Each time you recognize a regression, consciously return to your principles and choose a response aligned with your developed self rather than your reactive self. You strengthen the neural pathways supporting your transformation until the new patterns become truly automatic. Pressure. When you meet someone who triggers intense attraction, when you experience a dry spell in romantic prospects, or when rejection stings more than usual. Can you maintain outcome independence when you genuinely want a specific outcome? Can you preserve strategic absence when you feel the pull to constantly reach out? Can you stay focused on your own development when romantic possibility feels urgent? These pressure situations reveal whether transformation has reached your core or remains surface level. Genuine integration means your principles hold even when tested, not because you're rigidly controlling yourself, but because you've genuinely become someone for whom these principles represent natural expression. Someone you desire. This feels intensely motivating in the moment, driving you to text more, pursue harder, and invest more energy. But here's what most men don't understand. Dopamine isn't about pleasure. It's about the anticipation of reward. The constant pursuit keeps you locked in a dopaminergic loop that feels compelling but creates addictive patterns of behavior that women instinctively recognize as needy. You're literally experiencing a chemical addiction to the chase itself, not to the person you're pursuing. Constantly available and predictable, you're biochemically inducing contentment in her brain, while simultaneously experiencing addictive dopamine surges in yours. This neurochemical asymmetry explains why you feel increasingly obsessed while she feels increasingly indifferent. You're literally creating opposite brain states through your pursuit behavior. His work, Greene, consistently demonstrates that power and attraction follow identical principles. They flow toward those who appear not to need them desperately. This isn't manipulation, it's recognition of how human evaluation systems actually function. When you stop chasing, you interrupt the neurochemical pattern that was creating indifference in her and addiction in you. Suddenly, the dopamine dynamics reverse. She begins to wonder why you're no longer pursuing, what changed, whether she misjudged your value. This curiosity triggers dopamine in her system, the beginning of genuine desire rather than comfortable contentment. Language shifts, your neediness disappears because you're not actually needy anymore. Women perceive these changes through highly sensitive social radar that evolved specifically to detect authentic confidence versus performed confidence. The difference is subtle but unmistakable to feminine intuition. When you genuinely stop needing validation, you become magnetically attractive because you represent a psychological challenge that triggers curiosity and desire. Simply about withdrawing attention or playing hard to get, those tactics fail because they're strategies layered over unchanged internal psychology. Women detect the strategy and recognize it as manipulation, which destroys attraction even faster than obvious neediness. The transformation must occur at a deeper level: your identity, your sense of worth, your internal validation system. This requires understanding why you were chasing in the first place, what psychological needs drove that behavior, and how to fulfill those needs through internal development rather than external validation. This process takes longer than simply learning a tactic, but the results transform not just your dating life, but your entire relationship with yourself and your personal power. The transformation from chasing to attracting extends far beyond romantic contexts, creating ripple effects throughout your entire life. When you develop genuine self-sufficiency, outcome independence, and abundance mentality, these qualities influence your professional relationships, friendships, family dynamics, and self-concept. Robert Greene understood that personal power is holistic. You cannot embody powerlessness in one domain while maintaining power in others. The confidence you develop by stopping the chase of romantic validation bleeds into how you negotiate business deals, set boundaries with friends, and advocate for yourself in all contexts. The transformation is never merely about attraction. It's about fundamental personal development. Thoughtfully selecting situations aligned with your goals and values. Colleagues and supervisors respond to this selective engagement the same way romantic interests respond to strategic absence. They value your time and contributions more because they recognize you have standards and alternatives. Maintain approval. You can disagree, set boundaries, and prioritize your own needs without fearing abandonment because you've developed genuine self-sufficiency. Paradoxically, this strengthens rather than weakens your relationships. People respect boundaries and are drawn to those who respect themselves. The law of scarcity attraction applies broadly. When your time and energy are recognized as valuable resources that you allocate thoughtfully, others value access to you more highly across all. Your transformation, the same patterns that make you attractive to romantic interests, make you a more respected family member. You're no longer the one who can be taken for granted because you've established that you value yourself and expect others to do the same. Undermine, you become your own source of approval, which paradoxically makes others' approval both more available and less necessary. This self-relationship transformation represents the ultimate goal, not attracting more romantic interest, not achieving professional success, but developing unshakable internal peace that persists regardless of external circumstances. Robert Greene's work ultimately points toward this internal sovereignty as the foundation of all external power and of romantic status. The magnetic presence you've developed through this work will continue attracting opportunities, connections, and experiences aligned with your evolved self. Your commitment to this path doesn't end, it deepens, creating a life of authentic power, genuine connection, and sustained satisfaction that far exceeds anything chasing could have produced. External validation. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it, or better yet, demonstrate these principles through your lived example. The world needs more people operating from abundance rather than scarcity, confidence rather than desperation, and genuine power rather than performative strength. Your transformation doesn't just change your life, it changes the lives of everyone you interact with, creating ripples that extend far beyond what you can see. Human beings evolved in environments where scarcity was the default condition for everything valuable: food, safety, and reproductive opportunities. Our psychological mechanisms for evaluating worth developed in contexts where abundant resources usually indicated low value, while scarce resources signaled high value. This evolutionary programming doesn't disappear just because we now live in modern environments of relative abundance. When you make yourself constantly available to a woman, you're triggering ancient evaluation circuits that automatically categorize you as abundant and therefore less valuable. This happens completely outside conscious control, which is why women often can't articulate why they lost attraction. They just know they did. Increased motivation to acquire it. Conversely, when something appears perpetually available, the psychological urgency disappears. Every time you're immediately available when she texts, every time you rearrange your schedule to accommodate hers, every time you make it clear she's your top priority, you're eliminating psychological reactants. You're broadcasting that access to you involves no challenge, no uncertainty, no need for her to invest effort or compete. This kills the psychological tension that creates desire. Acknowledgement of how human psychology functions. The man who is always present becomes part of the psychological furniture, noticed only when absent. The man who creates strategic scarcity maintains constant psychological presence precisely because he's not always physically present. Perceive them as higher value than yourself. This creates an asymmetric dynamic where she receives constant validation of her value while you demonstrate your comparative lack of value through your behavior. Women are extraordinarily attuned to these social dynamics because female reproductive success throughout evolutionary history depended on accurate assessment of male status and resources. She's not consciously thinking his pursuit behavior indicates low status, but her instinctive attraction mechanisms respond to that behavioral signal regardless of conscious interpretation. And attention represents genuine value because your time actually is valuable. This requires the difficult work of personal development, pursuing meaningful goals, building skills, creating a social network, developing your career or business, cultivating hobbies and passions. When you do this authentically, scarcity isn't a tactic you deploy, it's a natural byproduct of a life worth living. Modern dating culture systematically ignores. The more emotionally invested you become in an outcome, the more your behavior unconsciously communicates desperation and neediness. This isn't opinion or theory, it's observable reality backed by decades of psychological research on attachment patterns and mate selection. When you chase women, you're essentially broadcasting low value through every action, word, and energy you project into the interaction. Involves what researchers call outcome dependency, a state where your emotional well-being becomes contingent on external validation from another person. Studies in behavioral psychology demonstrate that outcome-dependent individuals display measurably different body language, vocal tonality, and decision-making patterns compared to those who maintain emotional autonomy. Your nervous system literally shifts into a stress response when you're overly invested, triggering micro-expressions that others perceive subconsciously. These subtle cues communicate more than words ever could about your internal state and perceived value. Addiction, creating a cycle where each small bit of attention feels like a reward, reinforcing the chasing behavior. This creates an asymmetrical dynamic where the person being chased holds all the psychological power in the interaction. Place of abundance rather than scarcity. Psychological research on cognitive bandwidth demonstrates that anxiety and outcome dependency literally consume mental resources, leaving less available for genuine connection, humor, and presence. When you stop chasing, you suddenly have full access to your personality's best qualities. About genuinely cultivating an internal state where your happiness and self-worth aren't dependent on any single person's response to you. This shift from external to internal validation creates what psychologists call secure attachment energy, which paradoxically becomes magnetic to others. The very moment you stop needing validation is precisely when you become most attractive, because you're finally operating from your authentic power rather than from fear and scarcity. Modern dating operates as a validation economy where attention functions as currency, and most men are massively inflating their currency through oversupply. Every like on a woman's social media, every immediate text response, every compliment from dozens of men creates an environment where male attention is abundant and therefore nearly worthless. When you chase a woman in this context, you're adding to an already saturated market where she receives constant validation from multiple sources. Your attention becomes indistinguishable from the flood of attention she receives daily. You're competing in a marketplace where you've positioned yourself as a commodity provider rather than a unique value proposition. Immediately differentiates himself from 95% of men. This isn't arrogance, it's strategic positioning in a competitive marketplace. Women are consciously seeking men who are different from the masses of thirsty attention providers. When your behavior demonstrates that you operate by different rules, that you're not desperately seeking validation, you've positioned yourself in a category with dramatically less competition and dramatically higher perceived value. Mechanism underlying this is called the principle of investment. People value what they work for proportionally to the effort required to obtain it. When you make attraction effortless for a woman by doing all the pursuing, initiating, and investing, she experiences no sense of accomplishment or investment in the connection. The relationship holds minimal psychological value because she acquired it without effort. Conversely, when she must invest effort to maintain your attention, compete for your time and work to keep you interested, her psychological investment increases with every action she takes. This investment creates commitment through a process called cognitive dissonance reduction. She justifies her investment by increasing her valuation of the relationship. Great. Cleopatra, Casanova, and Byron all mastered the principle of making others pursue them by cultivating genuine value and then strategically withholding easy access. They didn't chase. They created the conditions where others felt compelled to chase them. This same principle applies to modern attraction. The question isn't how to get a specific woman to like you, it's how to become the type of man that women naturally pursue. This requires fundamental identity transformation, not tactical adjustment. Woman is simply one possibility among many. This isn't disrespectful or treating women as interchangeable. It's maintaining psychological equilibrium that prevents you from over-investing in anyone before they've demonstrated equivalent investment. This balanced approach is actually more authentic and sustainable than false scarcity-driven intensity. The scarcity mindset represents one of the most destructive psychological patterns in modern dating, yet most men remain completely unaware. They're trapped within it. This mental framework operates on the unconscious belief that opportunities for connection, intimacy, and attraction are fundamentally limited resources. When you internalize this belief, every interaction with a woman you find attractive becomes loaded with disproportionate significance because your mind perceives it as a rare and potentially irreplaceable opportunity. This psychological pressure inevitably manifests in your behavior, demonstrates that scarcity thinking activates the same neural pathways associated with survival threats, triggering your brain's fight-or-flight response during dating situations. When you believe attractive women are scarce, meeting one activates stress hormones that impair your prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for social intelligence, humor, and authentic self-expression. You literally become less capable of being your best self precisely when you most want to make a positive impression. This neurological sabotage happens entirely outside your conscious awareness. And precious, This distorted perception prevents you from accurately assessing compatibility and often leads to pursuing relationships that don't actually serve your deeper needs and values. Opportunities for connection that our ancient neural wiring hasn't fully adapted to recognize. Your brain still operates as if you're in a tribe of 50 people rather than a city of millions, creating an outdated survival response that no longer matches your actual circumstances. Plenty of fish in the sea rarely creates lasting change. Your nervous system needs repeated experiences of meeting new people, creating connections, and observing firsthand that attraction and compatibility aren't rare commodities. The transformation happens through accumulated evidence that gradually rewires your brain's fundamental assumptions about social reality and your place within it. The biological reasons why chasing women consistently fails extend far beyond cultural conditioning or social norms. Human mating psychology evolved over millions of years to favor certain behavioral patterns that signal genetic fitness and survival value. Across virtually all human cultures and throughout evolutionary history, behaviors indicating desperation, neediness, and low social status reliably predicted poor mating outcomes. Your brain, and the brains of those you're attracted to, contain ancient circuitry designed to detect and respond to these signals automatically and whose behavior accurately reflected their position in the social hierarchy. Female psychology evolved to interpret this behavior as the honest signal it typically was. History, high-value males with abundant options didn't need to chase, they were chosen. This isn't conscious reasoning or deliberate judgment, it's automatic processing happening in brain regions far older than language or rational thought. Fundamental drive to maintain autonomy and freedom of choice, and intensive pursuit threatens this autonomy. The more you chase, the more you activate their unconscious resistance, causing them to pull away not necessarily because they're uninterested, but because their psychology is defending against perceived threats to their independence and freedom. Means recognizing that attraction follows specific psychological principles that have remained remarkably consistent across human history. When you align your behavior with these principles rather than fighting against them, you work with human nature instead of against it. The solution isn't more effort, better lines, or increased persistence. It's fundamental realignment with how attraction actually operates at the psychological and biological level.